Hi, people joining. Hello. Okay, I'm going to try to do this without messing it up this time. I think I have managed to, let's see, not figure out how to go live with people 1,000 times on my other page. But this is actually the first time this page I think has gone live, except for last night. I completely randomly, went live just to test this out a couple times. Okay. I don't know why it's so hard. Okay, go. Let's see. No. Still don't see him, but he's going to be coming in here soon. It is only just now 2 o'clock, so I was a little early. So my guest today is going to be Danelle, and he and I worked for the same company, TD Ameritrade, which has now been, here we go. Is he on yet? Has now been bought out by Charles Schwab. So I talk a lot about Charles Schwab on here. Keep in mind that I never worked for Charles Schwab officially. Actually, that's not true. I did work for Charles Schwab officially in a technical sense. We'll probably get into that later in this live. But TD and Schwab are interchangeable to me at this point. That's not exactly how it is internally. And I know that because, I worked for them through this merger and there's lots of, technicalities and stuff. But as far as the law is concerned overall, TD and Schwab are the same company. But my guest today is a man who worked for the same company that I worked for. And he worked on the social media team at that company. And he was fired a week ago today. And he has been live tweeting and live streaming every single day of unemployment. Okay. No. Still not seeing him on here. But I'm really excited to talk to him because we have a podcast that is dropping today. And it's his podcast. He's been doing this podcast forever. And he's local here in Omaha. And if you guys, I'm sure you know, or if you're just jumping in here and you don't know me and you haven't been following the Omaha Oracle, I obviously live in Omaha too. So this guy has a podcast. It's called Hey Omaha. And so I encourage all of you to check that out and follow him once I can find him. Here. He's never gone live. So I'm actually going to pause here. Yeah! Yes, I knew eventually if I press enough buttons, I'd get you. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. Okay. So I was promising everybody you were coming, but then I was like, if I press the right buttons, eventually he'll pop up.
Yeah, I'm here, just working on that thumbnail to get ready.
Perfect. I mean, you do you. We're just hyping it right now. We've got a bunch of friends here. I have made everybody that I know that was potentially available at this time to be moderators just in case. It was frozen for some people. Yeah, it was frozen because I was texting you. If you go off the screen and you do something, it'll freeze, and it's weird because you're live on a platform. We live in such weird times, don't we?
Indeed.
Okay, so now we've got this started. I'm going to ask you, Danelle, introduce yourself. I've introduced you, but I'd like you to introduce yourself in your own words.
So if I have to introduce myself, I have to do my official intro.
Please.
All right.
Enter.
What's up, everybody? It's your man, Danelle, a.k.a. Small Guy Promotions, a.k.a. the Omaha Fatty. And I'm here live with none other than Courtney Kotzian. What up, y'all?
Also Happy known Wednesday. As the Omaha Oracle, except for I got a ban for life on the Omaha Oracle. And then as a Valentine's Day miracle, some people from TikTok came through for me, and they shall remain nameless, and got me up and going again after I was under siege from, I don't even know how to describe who I'm under siege at. I think I've made a lot of enemies. And so I've had a lot of people reporting my stuff. And I warned our friend here, the Omaha. What would you prefer to be called? What's your preferred name?
You can just call me Danelle. That's fine. Whatever.
Just Danelle. Okay. Well, Danelle here. I've been warning him that if you go live with me or you support me publicly, and there's a lot of people in the comments here that I'm seeing, woo, another survivor of the tyranny. So Tractors and Corn, that person is part of this whole thing. Most of the people here are so familiar with the story, Danelle, it's terrifying. I've been posting so much, it's hard to go through all of my content because I've been kind of live streaming my life, not just my online life or my workplace experience or anything like that. It's even more. Oh, Dr. Engels, yay! Dr. Engels, she's amazing. Her and I are friends. She's in California, also a TikTok creator. And
Uh-huh.
she also had a workplace issue very similar to mine, scary similar to mine, but in the military prison system.
Right.
It's crazy to be able to like bond with people over these issues because we have a common thing that we both experienced, but in completely different fields, and that's sexual harassment, which is what I came here, to talk about from a company that I worked at that Danelle was fired from,
Yeah.
unfortunately, literally 1 week today. And Danelle, like me, has been live streaming his life, and he's been doing like daily things talking about what it's like to be unemployed. Would you like to talk
Yeah.
to us about that?
My story is just I was there for a while, and I knew long ago that it wasn't gonna last, and uh, you know, I, I I told management that it was strictly transactional for me after a certain point of frustration. Uh, and then, things changed with the merger, and I said,
Mm-hmm.
that's not my path. And if you guys want me to do something like being on the phones, I don't care if it's only 2 hours a month as a phone associate, I'm not going to do that. I did that 14 years ago. I paid my dues in the
You
world
were at
of,
Pepsi for 14 years. That's something
yeah,
that I think is significant. That is a lifetime. That is an
never been
entire
written up.
lifetime.
Yeah, never been written up, had any issues like that. And it was strictly because, I rejected the scheduling of myself on phone rotation. I said I was not going to do that. So whatever, it happened for a reason. It was a little, it was stressful for my wife, and we had to talk. And I knew that she was going to be stressed out, but I didn't know the amount of stress that she was going to have. So that's what I made a video of today that I'm going to post later on LinkedIn and YouTube and whatnot. But just to make sure to clearly communicate with your spouse if you're in a position at a job or with an employer where you see the end of the line coming, and
Mm-hmm.
just effectively communicate so you limit the stresses that you will have as a couple, because I
Right.
felt horrible that she felt so bad about it. I didn't know again, I didn't know the extent of what she was stressing out. And I just had to tell her that, like, hey, you just keep doing what you're doing. I'll make sure to take care of the stuff on my end. Like, benefits are a big thing, and she's in
You.
business for herself. So it was
Mm-hmm.
either, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. No,
So
now
we,
I'm like completely. I'm like, okay, now I understand her total panic because I mean
yeah,
I'm in the
yeah,
same boat, and it's in my own way. Where when I got fired, I'm a single mom, so
yeah,
single mom, 2 kids, and all three of us have ADHD. All three of us have been diagnosed with it, and we're medicated. While I was working at TD Ameritrade, my kids and I, like, we've had to kind of go off of our medication. They do have insurance
yeah,
through like their dad's employer, and he lives in Florida though, which means the insurance benefits are very minimal. Which means I was paying out of pocket sometimes $600-700 a month per person in my household. You
yep,
know, and that
yep,
your money just is gone. And then on top of that, I was getting lawsuit subpoenas and stuff too, and then I had to pay for a lawyer. Then I have to pay. It's like I 100% understand her concern because the state of this country right now, it's unsustainable unless you have a large income coming in. And
yeah,
but the thing is, you've been doing the side hustle thing for the longest time, and the side hustle is your passion.
yeah,
And
yeah.
now
But
you but now you have
go
the
ahead.
time to do it. So it is like,
Yeah,
a scale where it's like it goes back to TD Ameritrade days of the risk reward. Like the stock
yep.
market, am I taking a huge risk for a huge reward? Or is this risk not worth whatever it is I'm going after? And what I eventually had to do, just some advice from somebody who's been unemployed from TD Ameritrade as a single mom for nearly a year at this point. And I haven't drowned yet. So this is a happy, positive story. Even though I
Oh,
have
yeah.
been harassed relentlessly and lawsuits thrown at me, I'm still having my head above water. And how I did that was to just, and this is going to be really, really, really corny, and I'm sorry, I believed in myself. I just believed in myself, and I believe that my passions and my creativity and my art and the things that I make and my ability to meet people and my ability to network and my ability to grow a network and my ability to form and this is a joke, army, or what it's being called in my comment section, a cult. Allegedly, I'm not starting a cult. Just saying that. I'm not actually starting a cult. I have to actually say that when I use the word cult for legal purposes, and I've been coached on that numerous times offline. Anyway, but you get what I'm saying. Building a community of people. Community is a better word than cult, but we're just gonna, whatever. I knew I could do it, and I did.
Yep.
And the whole time when I first started, you and I talked about this, and this is a bit of a sneak preview into the podcast that he's going to be dropping here later. You guys all have to go and listen to it.
Hey, before you go into that, do you have a title that you want this to be called, like for the podcast?
Yes. The CCC presents, and then you finish it.
The CCC?
The CCC. It's very meaningful to my followers.
Like, okay, are they're gonna know? Okay.
Oh, they'll know.
I'll include
glad
that.
You don't, because you probably wouldn't want to put it on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what I'll do is I'll mention it. I'll put it in.
Just like Easter egg that, and then title it whatever you want.
Okay.
I'm being snarky with that, but I'm kind of into it at the moment because this has been absolute madness for me for the longest time. Like our moderators here, like Texas Plant Lady and I have been absolutely under siege with so much harassment, bullying, and I don't even know what to call it. That we have trauma bonded. Like we would have never met each other. We would have never, and even at her as my follower, I don't think that we would have probably interacted to this degree if the harassment and bullying hadn't started to spread onto other people, which is kind of where I'm at right now in my story. But the best part of the podcast that's coming out today is what the trolls derailed, and this was their point all along. I was starting to get to the heart of the matter in my content on the Omaha Oracle page. I was really about to hit it home. I was telling a story in sequential order, like how it happened to me. But it was a story that had happened a long time ago. And at that time, I still had things going on in my own life that I wasn't talking about. Yeah. What their intention was to derail me so hard off of what track I was on that I would focus on them. And I have. And this has been going on for months, and it's been relentless. But I had told the story almost in its entirety. I left out one detail. And that detail is actually thrown in my comment section over and over and over again. And you know what? I did a video just yesterday about how I felt like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, or you can add to it, Danelle, if you felt this way, because you have a lot of feelings about taking phone calls as a non-phone rep at TD Ameritrade. You know what that means. And like my followers, the people who are in the comment section here, my moderators, they don't know what that means because they never worked at TD Ameritrade. When you've worked at the same company, and especially for a large amount of years, and you've made friend connections and sometimes romantic connections, whatever, you are ingrained into their culture so much. You speak your own language. It's a shorthand. And Danelle and I speak the same language. So in our podcast, to be honest, the people who are going to enjoy it the most are either going to be people who have followed my content so closely they can follow the TD Ameritrade language I'm speaking. And there are a ton of people who can do that, which is kind of terrifying. And who I'm actually targeting, who my target audience in my head was from day one when I started this, TD Ameritrade employees like Danelle here, who couldn't actually reach out to me professionally until he was fired himself. Because had he done that, it would have been a weird conflict of interest. A lot of people have crossed that line with me already and told me their stories from internally at TD Ameritrade. But I don't tell their stories for them, and I won't. And I'm not going to tell Danelle's stories either. But what was great about this podcast, and we talked on Monday, and we didn't even know, like going into it, he's like, I mean, how long do you want to talk? And I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, I mean, if you look at my content, clearly I can go on about this for a year straight. Yeah. So, I mean, it really comes down to when do you want me to shut up? Shutting up is the hard part for me. So it was great.
2 hours.
We just chatted.
It was about 2 hours, but we're gonna cut it into two segments. We're gonna do. We were just shy of 40 minutes for the first segment, so I think it's about 37 or 38 minutes. And then we're gonna release that at probably about 3 p.m., 3:30 today. That'll be on YouTube under What's Up Omaha Small Guy Promotions, and then it'll also be wherever you're listening to podcasts on the audio side.
Yep.
I always say it's out there on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Radio Public, wherever you're at, iHeartRadio, all that stuff, Podbean. The podcast is out there. So we'll have that going off. And then I'll make sure to, I don't think it makes sense to wait a week to post the second segment. So I'm just going to go ahead and post it tomorrow.
Do it. Yeah.
So
it does kind of land on a cliffhanger a little bit, I think, our two sections, because you did finally ask me, how did you get fired? Because I talk about being terminated, and I've been talking about it forever at this point, but I never actually told the story. Never. And the only place you're going to hear it is on that podcast.
I think you'll like it. I'll send this over to you, but the title will be How I Got Fired from TD Ameritrade.
Yes.
And then we're going
That's the final chapter of that story.
Then we're going to put, you said the CCC?
The CCC.
Is that a hashtag? Do you use that as a hashtag?
Yeah.
Okay,
it's
cool.
a thing. It's the trolls are really mean, and they started saying that I was like because people have complimented me that my news reporter voice in my videos, especially the ones that is like highly scripted, that I'm trying to get a very direct point out on, that I sound like a news anchor.
Yeah.
And that was like, I was like kind of going with that. I'm like, I like being a news anchor. Okay, that's my identity, because I'm trying to figure out my own identity here. I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what's written. None of us know what we're doing. We're just out here doing it. And so they started to use that against me, because they used anything that people liked about me against me, because, yes, I'm screenshotting this right now because I love it. My hand over it. There we go. Okay, totally love it. That is awesome. How I got fired from TD Ameritrade. Yeah. And so like the actual details of it is a long story with a shitload of context and 7 or 8 tangents and 5 stories that took up 2 hours of our time. And during that, we got to know each other. And I think when you guys listen to it, you're going to get to know him too. And you're going to get to know me really well, because with each of me, like, you have to change your, and Danelle doing a podcast, and he's been doing it for years. His podcast has been out forever, and this is not his normal content, and this is not normally when he drops.
Yeah, definitely not. But it has to do with Omaha, and my podcast is called What's Up Omaha. And I was going to say this earlier when you were talking, like, when I had someone outside of work reach out to me about what was going on, that's when I was like, hey, like, this is something that I need to look into. That's what did it. Like, I'm like, if people who don't work at Ameritrade, who are not on like the team that I was working on, they're seeing this stuff and they're contacting me about it, like, I feel like I'm like, there's something there for me to look into and to report on some level. Like, I mean, my podcast is, it's different. Like, we're just talking. It's not like an interview. Like, I am asking questions, but it's all like just a conversation. That's all it is.
Very similar to this.
Yeah. Sometimes I get people on who have never been on a podcast, or they don't like being on camera, or they're nervous, and they don't think that they can talk for 20 minutes. And before you know it, we've been talking 45 minutes. And I say, because it's a conversation. Have you ever went to lunch with someone and talked to them like a friend? Have you ever had a phone conversation with a friend for like 35 minutes, 45 minutes? If you've done that, then you can be on the podcast. Like, all we're doing is sitting and have a conversation.
I love that so much. And I've got something to throw onto that real quick though, because what you're like, oh, I talk to people who've never been on a podcast, who don't think that they can be on camera, that, all those things. That was me a year ago. When I got fired, I wanted to do this. I wanted to tell my story, but I didn't want to tell my story myself. I wanted somebody else to tell my story because I was too afraid to tell it myself. And I tried to find people to tell my story, and everybody's like, just go on TikTok or something. And I'm like, I can't go and make videos on TikTok and tell my story. Who is going to listen to it? And then when I finally got over that, and it was, oh my goodness, May, June, July. It was 3 months because it was 2 months of me just getting over nobody wants to hear me talk. And then the last month was, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to talk, but I need to at least feel like I look good doing it. So I learned how to do my makeup, which I never knew how to do. I learned how to do my hair, which I've never learned how to do. I dressed myself like a news reporter from my old TD Ameritrade clothes. And then I realized, oh, how you dress yourself and put on your makeup to do a job interview at TD Ameritrade, that's what you do when you go on camera. And that's how I started. But I actually didn't start there. No, I completely messed up at first. Unemployed for a while. So I was mostly just making art. And I was usually and it was in the middle of summertime, wearing overalls and like my sports bra top because it's 1,000,000 degrees. My kids are in and out everywhere. They never learned to shut the doors properly because they're teenage. That's my regular life. I went on camera that way once at the very beginning. And the amount of people who told me how inappropriately I was dressed to be talking about corporate matters. That's when I realized, holy shit, I somehow ended up on corporate TikTok because I have all of these asshole middle managers literally trying to tell me, you don't get to talk about sexual harassment with that much boob showing. And like, I honestly got comments like that. And that's when I started trolling trolls because I'm like, did you just say that to me? But subtly, those messages got through. And I realized if I'm going to talk to the people I want to talk to, I'm probably not going to be able to do it in my overalls. I probably at least need to put a sweater over it and cover up, the boobs, even in the summertime, because I don't, I'm just hanging out of my house, right? That's the issue with TikTok is that you become way too personal and comfortable. It's like all of a sudden you have all these friends that are in your house all the time and you forget about the fact that it's everywhere. And I think when that really hit me that I was making a gigantic impact is the same time you heard about me, which was when I went viral. Like when I sat down in the shirt I was wearing when I got sexually harassed, which that's why I pulled out my old TD Ameritrade wardrobe that I hadn't used in a year because we were working from home that whole time. So like the majority of me getting bullied out of my job, I was working from home and I was recording it because I was working from home and I could. Because as well as I do, had I pulled out my freaking phone in the middle of any conversation between me and my manager, I would have been fired on the spot. But work from home allows you so much freedom. And this is why people don't want you guys to go back to the office. I mean, that's in a nutshell is that they want to be able to harass you, bully you, and all of that stuff without you being able to hit record and them not knowing. Because we live in a state where only one party of a two-way conversation has to know it's being recorded in order for it to be recorded legally. And I learned so much about law. I learned so much about employment law and law. I know what I'm doing here. Sometimes I don't really, like the twists and turns of like the harassment and the trolling and the threats on my children and the CCC, which is, I started telling you that and I got off topic there. So the CCC stands for the Clueless, C-word, Cult, Channel. There's a couple of other C's. So my trolls think they're clever.
Wait, how many C's are there? Because I only put 3. I only put 3 C's. How many C's are there?
So clueless, bad word, cult, or channel. It started out as a channel because he was saying I was the anchor for the CCC, which was kind of funny because I got introduced to a woman, a creator here, and she runs a network that's called NFG News. And that stands for No Fucks Given News. And so she saw that comment, came onto my page and goes, well, the CCC is officially a part of the NFG News Network. And she's like super popular here. And I was like, yeah, man, I am. So we like formed an alliance with the CCC and because, like the acronyms for these are really inappropriate, but it's like a spoof on the appropriateness of news anchors because I keep getting told I sound and look like a news anchor, which actually when I went to college, I wanted to be a journalist. So I'm kind of like pantomiming my childhood dreams here and just turned myself into a news anchor because, TikTok lets me do it. So
Yeah, you
yeah.
can do anything with technology.
Yes, see, and I really hope that my story, and I know that you know my story on a very intimate level as far as your employment is concerned. What I'm hoping to give to you in this, because you're giving me something huge, you gave me an opportunity to speak to Omaha. And I want to talk to Omaha. I mean, I put Omaha in the name of my, biggest platform because I wanted to speak to the people who worked there, who are currently working there, who might be experiencing some really shitty behavior, like what you experienced, what I experienced. And
Well,
I want them to
what I
start
experienced,
immediately.
yeah,
I frankly
my
do.
experience is nothing compared to, what you have gone through and other people. Like when I was
Stop
talking to
that.
people
No,
who
yours
worked
was
there,
you worked there for 14 years and they pushed you out of a job and fired you last week. Your 14
eh,
years, 14 years of your life is not something to do this on. I was telling you this the other day, and I'm like everybody else, don't listen. This is just between us. I was telling you this the other day. When you get fired from a job, you go through stages of mourning and grief. And whether you believe it or not, you're going through those. You're going through those stages. You
I'm
lost a
going
big
through
part of
joy
your life.
and joy and joy. I'm
I
going
went to
through.
therapy through this entire experience. And let me tell you, stop minimizing your experience. You were there for 14 years. That is a lifetime. I was only there
It
for four
is. It
years,
is.
and I have been in therapy for 2 years because of it. Okay. Yeah, mine may have been a magnified version of yours. Nobody can just questioning that. But what you telling your side of your story adds to the voices. Tractors and Corn is in here. She added her voice to my story. You're adding your voice to my story. A lot of
Well,
my followers
and
added their voice to my story. This is not my story, it's our story. And it's a
yeah,
story
and
of
there's
what
other
corporate
people
America
too.
does to
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I mean, the people that came forward that I didn't even think about or whatever, who said that it was like, they had similar experiences or just whatever. And I'm thinking, like, why would that be allowed? Like, I just don't understand. Like, people going through depression because of what they dealt with and whatnot. And
People
like,
having full
I'm,
nervous breakdowns and going on
yeah,
LOA.
yeah,
There's
like,
one
and
of
then
the
getting harassed about that.
and yes, one of the closest women in my story, and this is a
Yeah,
teaser for the podcast that you guys have to watch. It was the only time because we talked about like name dropping in this, and we don't name drop. I mean, if you know, you
not the
know.
friends, not
If you know,
friends.
you
We don't name
know.
drop friends.
No name drops, but if you know, you know. If you're listening to it and you're like, I know who that is, it's because you know that person and you know that person, or you are that person. Um, and so I accidentally name dropped somebody and was like immediately going, can you edit that out? And I'm sure you did one time.
I
And I was
haven't
so
got to
proud
that
of
segment
myself.
yet because that was in the second segment, but I will.
Mhm. Oh yeah. Well, you don't get to hear that one today then. That is a teaser on top of a teaser. But yeah, like this is, I don't like corporate America gaslights the shit out of people. And that's why the great resignation is on right now. And I am a huge voice for the great resignation. That is my following on TikTok. Is I have 100,000 followers on my other page, and the majority of those. Well, okay, I actually broke it down at a point just because I was starting to get some really weird stuff. It's 30% disenfranchised workers, 30% people who follow To Catch a Predator TikTok. And then the other side is like some really weird stuff, and a lot of feminism in there too. So like that's like the corner of TikTok I'm on. But the Great Resignation is a huge deal in like my corner of TikTok because there's so many people who are disenfranchised by corporate life. And it really does take a beating on your mental health. Like your mental
Yeah,
health is, and I am very strong in the mental health. I don't think, I mean, I'm going to be fucking honest with this. 99.9% of human beings could not have dealt with what I dealt with over the last 2 years of my life, going on 3 now. Like, I can't believe that I've lived through this. And it's such an unbelievable story. I had to tell it. Like, as I said, I always wanted to be a journalist. So I've been my whole life searching for that story to tell. But my whole life, I've always wanted to tell other people's stories. So when it came time for me to tell my story, I started off wanting other people to tell my story for me until I
yeah,
realized that I had to tell it myself. And so I did. And I never finished it. I never got a chance to finish it. I never got a chance to take it right up to how they fired me, how they actually got me
to stop coming in the next day. And I tell him the whole story, and it's the only place it's been told. And the trolls, that's their main question to me is, you didn't get fired, you quit. And I will be perfectly honest, I felt like I got terminated, but I am smart enough and level-headed enough of a human being to be able to see somebody else's perspective. And I can see where there could be an argument there that I quit. But I didn't quit. I was terminated. Danelle was also terminated. We were both terminated. And when that happens, when you actually get terminated, you lose all of the licenses that you earned, because you will never be hired in the securities industry again if you get fired. It's a statement. It's a thing. I mean, you know that to be true. Like, I'm not making that up. Like, that goes before U5, and it's not official, but no other brokerage firm wants to hire somebody who's been fired because yeah.
For me, I didn't. This spoiled me on wanting to do that anyway. I've for years have known that I was gonna, once I left TD Ameritrade, I was not gonna be back in the financial world. So that didn't ruin anything for me. Like, I'm telling you, I've had a plan in my head for so long. Like, that's why I'm so, like, I'm unbothered. I was unbothered when they told me that that they were letting me go. Like, I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, see, Practice warned. She actually left before that moment happened to her, because she knew that she wanted to stay in the industry, and she knew if she had stayed any longer. And I can tell you the absolute certain fact on that. That's a little bit of a story I haven't told yet. I knew she was going to be fired because her boss bragged about the fact they were going to fire her. She got a job somewhere else before it happened, and good for her. She got to keep all of her licenses. Whereas I had to wait until they fired me, because I knew that I was going to file an EEOC complaint, but I was too afraid to file the EEOC complaint while I was still working there. And then when it finally got to a point where I was like, hell's no, I'm filing that EEOC complaint. And I put the date on their calendar and realized they were 6 months out just for initial interviews. I couldn't even get an interview with the EEOC for 6 months because of COVID. And I cried because I was like, there's no way they're going to not fire me within the 6 month period of time. So then I just stayed there, and I had a goal. I was going to make it at TD Ameritrade. I was going to stay there. They were not going to fire me. They were not going to make me quit. They were not going to do it. They were not going to manage me out of that role. I was going to stand my ground until October 16th. I got fired in May. So you can see how much of a absolute failure of a goal that was for me. They fired me way sooner than I wanted them to. I was like, I knew they were going to do it. You know, like you were talking about, it's like, you know, at a point when your days are numbered, you know, because you're getting managed out, you know. I had people that I worked with from TD Ameritrade. This is another fun move that they like to make, where they'll tell you, this is awesome. They'll be like, hey, for your sake, we're not going to fire you, but you need to find another job. And then if you're like, okay, and that's all off the record, you know, it's not a written meeting or anything. It's all just hearsay, right? Deniability. Plausible deniability is the name of the game. So tell you to get a job somewhere else. And I've heard like rumors of people getting managed out like that. One of my favorite was, and we talk about this guy in the podcast, we will abbreviate his name to SS. SS sent an email to all the higher ups that he was going to manage out a woman that worked for him. And he just accidentally sent it to her instead.
Ha!
Yeah. She didn't even have to file an EEOC complaint or anything else. After that email went out, she got a enormous settlement, signed an NDA, and walked her happy ass out the door. And I was like, you know what? In that circumstance, because when you get managed out, they launch a campaign against you, and it could take years for them to actually get rid of you, because all they're doing is looking for you to make one mistake, just one toe out of line. Like Danelle, after 14 years, he put one teeny tiny little toe out of line, and boom, he got out, right? It's super easy to get fired when they've launched a campaign against you.
And I will also say this: it was outside of my manager's control, because this was like a Schwab thing, them and putting people on the phones. And
I don't agree with that, honestly. I bet he knew. I bet he did.
No, I mean, whatever, but no, and we, I knew, and
yeah.
But again, it wasn't anything that he could control. Like, it was above him. Like,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah, that's the same with my manager. Even Kate, my manager, and I talk badly about her, but it was out of her control. It was a step above. And we've talked about Kevin Will with that, and I don't mind name dropping him because he's the one, like he's saying, that actually signed off on this shit. And and there's the level below, middle managers are literally soldiers. Like, you follow orders or you're out. And they don't mess around with that. They do, and they pick managers that will happily do that for them too, which is literally the entire thesis statement of my entire platform.
Well, I told you how they tried to do the whole thing where, we had a request if we wanted to work from home 100% of the time, and I submitted the request, and it was approved by my manager. And I could see in the system that it was waiting for approval from the senior manager, and it got, well, they didn't even decline it in the system or reject it in the system. They asked me to remove it from the system because I had an open disciplinary action case because I hadn't been taking phone calls.
Keep talking. I'm gonna be right back. Just keep talking, please.
So, and then since I said that I wasn't going to take phone calls, they rejected my request to continue working from home. And it was at that moment I was like, you're not going to bully me and strong arm me. That's not about to happen. Like, whatever, man. So, it's clear. It's clear what's happening here. Like, my time is over. My manager even said that he liked what I brought to the table, to the position. And again, like, I don't blame my manager, like my ex-manager. I don't blame him. Again, it's just the corporate culture when they tell you that people matter and that integrity first and whatnot, but that's not really the case.
Okay, but here, I'm gonna poke you in the empathy button here. So now, okay, my dog's getting really excited about this because I got up to grab something and they're like, "Ooh, this means we play now." Okay, stop. Hey, go lay down. Okay. So, empathy button. Now consider this happened to you, but your manager was a woman who has the maturity of I'd say 12-year-old mean girl who enjoys getting people fired, who has about 7 or 8 people behind you that she never doesn't have a target. She always is managing at least one person off her team. She hires people for Elvis, stop it. For the sole purpose of managing them out. If you were in that situation with that manager, you would probably be as mentally broken as I was when I got fired last year. Like, it would be a lot worse. It does really matter about your manager. And if your manager, but it doesn't matter about your manager. That's the other thing. It matters how humanely they treat you as they bully you out of the company, But I had to show this. So, like, here's one of my tarot cards. Danelle, you got to look at this because this person right here, this one right here, is modeled after the man that we talked about, the senior JC.
Yeah.
I modeled this after him in my tarot deck. Everybody loves him. He's so great. He's great. He really is. Yeah. This is one of my favorite cards, the Blasted Tower. Very descriptive card, but yeah. Okay, so
definitely not a fan of that guy.
Oh no. What's funny is when I first started doing a TD Ameritrade tarot deck and was telling people about it, almost every girl I know at TD Ameritrade, woman I know at TD Ameritrade who's super into tarot, which, just so you know, there's an entire underground like witches coven at TD Ameritrade that I was definitely probably started myself. I'm really good at starting coalitions, okay? They taught me in servant leadership how to start a coalition, and I listened to that. But I had like this group of very like women who like do crystals and all this stuff, and it was so funny because when I talked about doing this, they're like, you have to do the TDA building as the tower, and you have to have JC as one of the people flaming out of the building. And I'm like, yeah. And then I'd have somebody else go, no, he needs to be the 10 of swords. And I'm like, oh, that's another statement. I'll have to show you these cards, the real ones, just to get what I'm saying. This is, again, a whole nother language that I speak. to people with this. And this is how I wanted to tell my story, was through art, because I felt like it was like so much better of a, like, I wouldn't get myself in trouble. I wouldn't have lawsuits being filed against me or anything if I did it that, you know, through art and through different means like that. But then I started to realize how many people shared my story at TD Ameritrade, where they got managed out, and people who were currently getting managed out, and people who were getting managed out just because they knew me. So personal. They made it so personal against me, even after they fired me, that like a lot of people started contributing to it. So I just got to show you these cards. So these are the cards that all of the witchy women at TD Ameritrade said should be associated with JC. See, look, this one's pretty telling. He literally has 10 swords in his back and one, or 9 swords in his back and 1 in his ear. So most of the women at TD Ameritrade that I know that also like tarot cards associate that image with the man that we are referring to as JC.
And I will say he wasn't my super manager, senior manager at the time of my departure, but you know.
Isn't he a director now though? Or not?
I don't know. I just was happy to not be around that fake phoniness. That, you know, that's not my thing. And I get along with people very well usually. And at first I thought he was a decent enough dude, but then I was like, this guy's a douche. Douche.
Grandmaster douche, like huge douche. And then I have another one that I talk about a lot. He's the director over that guy. So actually, I wouldn't even say the buck stops at a senior manager. It goes up to the director. Like director by director of each department is what actually, you know, okay. This was a large part of my content before I got derailed by crazy trolls. Was I talked about managerial feudalism, that in corporations like this, and it's a phrase that was coined, there we go, phrase coined by the late David Graeber, and he wrote this book called Bullshit Jobs. And Danelle, I will literally drive to your house and hand you a damn copy of that and make you read it, because once you read it, you're like, I see it all clearly now. And it talks about how managers in corporations like ours, for example, will say that like the directors, and we've talked about 2 directors here, Kevin Wilson will say KW and SS, right? 2 directors, 2 different departments, right? They would be like the lords on a feudal land, okay? Back in the kings and queens of England, right? Feudalism. So they would be the lords. And then they would have their minions under them, and they would have their minions under them, and then they would have all of the peasants under them, like a pyramid scheme, like an MLM scheme. This is how it works. We've never grown out of feudalism. We've never grown out of it, even though we should. But we make tiny feudalist societies within cultures, within companies, and depending on who your lord is, it's like Game of Thrones. Like, if you have the evil, sadistic lord that likes to torture people, that was Kevin Will for me, you're not going to have a good time. Now, if you have the guy who is just on the land next to that guy, which would be like SS, who's like, I mean, I like to torture people, but I'm a little bit more specific. I kind of just like to dehumanize the women because me and my wife's relationship isn't what I thought it was going to be at this stage. And I know that him and his wife's relationship isn't what he thought it would be at this stage, not because I'm just guessing, but because this is how he treated women that he was grooming for leadership, because he groomed me for leadership. He would trap me in the office with him or with a large group of other women. And it wasn't sexual harassment, but to me, this is still discrimination. It's still like an issue for me, because he would have never done this to you, Danelle. And tell me all of the issues him and his wife were currently having and ask my advice on how he should deal with it. And I'm like,
yeah, I don't know, bro.
The fuck do you think I am? I just got off the phone taking phone calls in NCDG, and now I'm sitting in your office giving you marital advice. I mean, yeah, I have a lot of feelings about what you just said. You're not going to want to hear me out on it, but he did hear me out on it. So he liked me more. And I just tell him things like, so it sounds like she doesn't like your non-apologies, dude. And he's like, what's a non-apology? I'm like, if you come into a conversation with a woman and you say something like, I'm sorry you feel that way, or something along those lines, like if she's like, you never helped me out with the kids or the house, and you say something in return like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. You're not apologizing. You're saying you're apologizing for her feelings, you know? And I would sit here and talk him through these complicated inner human emotions. And I'm like, this isn't my job, but I was getting paid for it. I also was getting free concert tickets. I also was getting the employee of the month parking spots. In NCDG, we had a huge budget. So in 1 year, I ended up with, and I know this because I still have all of my tax returns and I just did the taxes. I actually added it up. The year that I was being groomed for leadership, I made in just outside bonuses, meaning things that didn't have to be tax deductible, or no, sorry, not tax, non-tax income. I had $9,000 in 1 year given to me in Amazon gift cards that never had to be taxed.
Wow.
They give you perks. You're talking about the benefits, the perks this place gives you if you do things like sit in a manager's office and give him actual therapy, free therapy. That is not my job. And that should never be any woman's job at work. If Danelle isn't asked to do that, I should never be asked to do that. I don't care if they're trying to groom me for leadership. If I'm like, it proves I'm a better leader if I give people free emotional labor because I'm female. It might not be actual sexual harassment. They might not be like saying, hey, you have to go in the back room with me. But that is sexually based discrimination. And like, I talked about that when it happened. They didn't like me. And then I went from leadership track to, and I talk about that story on Danelle's podcast as well. I also posted a couple of old videos where I talk about these people too on this page, just to make context. But okay, I think we're gonna wrap up. Oh, you got something?
I was just about to say that because I was like, hey, it's actually almost 2:50. Yep. We said 30 minutes.
Yep. We were going to be, I mean, and that's how the podcast is too. Thank you guys so much for coming in. Danelle, get that up, keep in touch. And this was great. I'm going to download this and probably put it on my YouTube channel too for anybody who missed it. So thank you. Ooh. Bye guys. Okay. Now to figure out how to end it.
Have a good one.
You too.